I had forgotten all about this list, but when I found it, I understood why I hadn't read that much. Hi, my name is Jøden and I have started to read, but in today's video I'm going to show you a list that I found of books that the former me thought I should be reading. So this list is originally from 2015. All my life I've enjoyed making lists of books, movies, food, about anything you can think of. And obviously I've made several lists over the years about books, but I think I've deleted most of them. But suddenly I found one of them that was named Books That Should Be Read, which is a pompous and lame title. But I think my point was that if I read these books I will become an intellectual. I'll become something smart. But just to reflect a brief moment, I think this is where all my problem starts, because I've thought about reading as something I should be doing and something I should be doing because I want to become smarter or more enlightened, not because it's fun. And as I've discovered this year, that's the entirely wrong place to start. But nevertheless, I think we'll go through my list. And for those who follow this channel closely, this might be the most predictable video you'll ever see, because I think if you've watched my videos you'll maybe guess about 90% of these books. The first book on this list is accompanied by 3 dots, so it's the title of the book, the author and 3 dots. I think that's because of its size. And this is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. I've been scared of big books earlier, not that much anymore, but I think the dot speaks for itself. I've thought about this as a big brick that I just have to get through. I think that For Whom the Bell Tolls is one very cool title of a book. It's of course also a Metallica song. That's maybe why I initially picked it, even though I don't enjoy Metallica that much, but music related titles sort of is a thing for me. As time has passed, I've read The Old Man and the Sea, because that was a very small book. I did not fall for the language. I thought that was kind of slow and irritating. So I don't know if this is a book that will be read at some point. I also talked about this book in my unhaul video, so I thought about getting rid of it, but there's just something that makes me not want to let go. But objectively, I think it's really easy for me to say that I understand that the younger version of me thought that reading this one will be a good idea. At least if you want to be portrayed as an intellectual or something along those lines. The next book on the list I've actually read by now, and it's The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde seemed like a person that I would enjoy, so seen from the outside I think that this wasn't the worst choice. It's a shorter novel. It would have been a good idea to pick this up a couple of years ago. It's about wanting eternal youth and beauty, and I didn't enjoy it that much when I read it, but I think that's just because it was a bad time. At least it felt a bit slow when I read it. And I think if someone's starting out reading classics, I think this isn't the worst place to start, at least. Already now I think you can see a theme of the books I've chosen for my former self. Following in the same footsteps we have Ulysses by James Joyce. This is a novel I've talked about several times on this channel, because I've always wanted to read it, and each time I talk about it someone comes in the comment section and says to me that I should not be reading this book. At this point I agree. I do not think I'm ready for this. A confusing read. It's not for me. Maybe ever, but certainly not at this point. But if you're a young man going on the internet trying to figure out which books you should be reading, this is probably one of those that appears quite quickly. And James Joyce is known to be a genius of some sorts, but also makes books that people don't understand, so yes, not today. The next book is also for young men, presumably, and it's The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. One of the biggest classics when it comes to coming-of-age novels, and I think that's why many people write about it as books you want to be reading as you grow up or become a young man. But at this point I'm a bit on the fence, because people seem very divided when it comes to this novel. Some think it's really great, and some think it's a bit pretentious and not that well written. I've been quite near picking this book up several times, but since I've started on BookTube I have become a bit unsure about this one. The next book I've already read, and I think it's quite fun thinking about the former me having thought that I should read it, and the present me reading it without thinking about the former me or remembering that I made this list. And it's Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is one of the dystopian classics about how the world could be in the future, and it's not a pretty sight. Even though the plot is quite cool, I thought it was a bit slow. I think I would have recommended the former me reading this novel just because I would have been one of the cool kids, and it's not that difficult to read it, so easy cool kid points. For the next one, I thought I would start out with a quote, and it's ... wanted to understand the anxiety that must have been present in Abraham when God commanded him to offer his son as a human sacrifice. As you might understand, I'm not ready for this, and it's Fear and Trembling by Søren Kierkegaard. Of course, a Danish philosopher and writer, and one of the Scandinavian alibis in this video. I love the title of this novel, Fear and Trembling. It sounds so profound and cool, but still, when reading about the plot, I do not think this one is for me. It brings me back to thinking that I should be reading the Bible at some point, but I think we'll just see in the future. The next on the list is definitely a book I will be reading at some point, and it's War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Since I read 2 Dostoevsky novels, I think it's just fair to read a Tolstoy novel pretty soon, just so I can compare them and then become ultra intellectual. My girlfriend has read the first one of these and hated it. If I love it, we can argue. That will be fun. But I'm sort of fearing that I will think this is a boring novel. I might just read Anna Karenina instead. If you have suggestions for starting with this one or Anna Karenina, you can comment below and I'll try to decide on which one I should be reading first. I have read 2 Dostoevsky novels, so it's only fair to read 2 of his as well, even though they're this size. Next one on the list is the Norwegian one, and it's The Jew by Henrik Wergeland. This is a collection of poems and plays, and it's a part of the debate if Jews were allowed to live in Norway or not in the 1800s. Might be one of the most important ones on the list, but it's still poems, so I'm a bit scared of starting, but at some point I think that one will be read as well. Henrik Wergeland is one of the big figures in Norwegian literature, so it's only fair that I'll read something of him one day. The next in line for the must-be-read books is Franz Kafka and The Trial, his maybe most known book, a part of all lists on the internet about the most important books in the last 100 years, and that's probably why it's on this list as well. Reading Kafka seems like a thing cool people do, and who doesn't want to be cool? I think this is a book that I either would love or hate. I do not exactly know. I'm not sure about the language in these novels. If you know it's a simple language, please comment below, because if it's easy understandable, I might pick this up quite soon because of its size. But that's it. I think Kafka deserved to be on my former self list. Then we have The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Actually, when I picked this up in my shelf right now, I thought that maybe this one is one I should be reading soon, because I'm really intrigued by the contents of this novel. It's about a man traveling to the Swiss Alps to a sanatorium, and then sort of the novel is about comparing this sanatorium to Europe, which isn't the worst comparisons at times. Published in 1924, it would be really interesting to see what thoughts he had in his head when writing this novel. This might be one of the books I'm most pleased to find on this list, maybe because it's not the most obvious choice. At least that's what I'm feeling now, and maybe in the future I'll read it and despise it. Who can tell? Not me. I am unable to choose the right books for me, at least, it seems. So this is definitely one of the books I hope to read soon. And then suddenly appears a woman, and it's The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. I have read A Portrait in Sepia by Allende, but that was when I traveled to Chile and was on vacation there, so really happy being on vacation. That might affect my reading. I've actually tried to start this novel several times, but there's just something about the language that makes me not pass the first 20 pages. This is a huge modern classic, but I'm a bit afraid of the magical realism again. But at some point I will try again and see if it goes. Maybe I'll just give up. At least I've tried this several times already. So these were actually all of the books, and I must say that I'm kind of intrigued of how on point my former self was, because when I look back at that person that chose all these books, it was a person that wanted to become a reader in a sense, but also just wanted to portray himself as a person that have read all these big classics to show off in some way. And I don't think that's an unnatural approach to reading. I think many people try out this method and see that it's not for them, but it ends up being them not reading anything at all, because reading classics can be boring, and often is. But it's cool being in this situation where I read at least one book a week and then looking back to the person that struggled to start with one book at all. So yay! What would happen if I made this list today? Well, probably there would be more than one woman. Also, it would be in general a more diverse list. Maybe some fantasy, maybe children's novels, maybe or definitely more modern books in general, and more accessible books, I guess. But that's a part of the current process, finding out which books I really enjoy. Have you ever made a list about books that you should be reading? Please comment below if you have, that would be interesting to see. And thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!